What's up everybody, it's Aaron Engineered. Welcome to my channel if you're new. Welcome back if you are not. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to be doing a little install of EVE-NG on my hypervisor, which is ESXI 6.7. EVE-NG is an emulation software that you can use to run network nodes and practice for networking exams, things like that. It's vendor agnostic, so you can use any images that are already pre-built in there that you bring yourself. So we'll take a look at that. Of course, this isn't the only emulation software out there, but this personally at this moment happens to be my favorite, and I did pay for the Pro Edition, and I will compare and contrast those as well. So let's get to it. Okay, first things first, let's talk a little bit about the differences between EVE Free Community Edition and the EVE Professional Edition. This one's gonna cost you 99 euros. If you don't know what that is in US dollars, it's somewhere around 120 bucks, I think, at this moment, given the exchange rate. But there are quite a few differences you get with that. And of course, you know, these guys are doing a lot of hard work behind the scenes, so they got to make money somehow. One of the most noticeable things right off the bat is the node limit per lab is 63 here with the free edition, and it's 1024 with the Pro Edition. Interestingly though, this is really going to depend mostly on the hardware that you're running it on. And me personally, I run this on a DELL PowerEdge R620. It's got 96 gigs of RAM, and it's got 16 CPUs, so it's got plenty of horsepower to run this, which is why I'm also using this. And I'm probably thinking to yourself, when would I ever use 1024 nodes? That's a ton, right? But for anybody that's out there studying for their like CCIE or maybe sort of like the Juniper equivalent of that, you're going to start to need a lot of nodes, and it's also going to be difficult to run that on your computer too. So, you know, having this Pro Edition really is tied closely with having enough hardware to back it up, you know, whether that is a server, a standalone server, or maybe in the cloud like AWS or Azure or something like that. One of my favorite reasons for going with the Pro, you know, it is $100 for a year, but actually there's two more that I'll point out. One of which is the support for this link quality. So you can apply delay, packet loss, and jitter to a link just by right-clicking on that link. So if you have two nodes, like let's say you have two routers, you can click the link between the two and inject problems essentially. So if you were doing some sort of like policy-based routing, or like let's say you had an SD-WAN lab set up, that you would be able to do the link aggregation or you know, the thresholds and set them to, hey, 10% packet loss, inject 11% packet loss and see what happens to that link, see if it actually fails over, things like that. So I find that super helpful, which is one of the reasons why I went with the Pro again. And then the other one is the support for the Docker containers. So there's some pre-built Docker containers in here that are pretty sweet. One of which is just like a GUI that has like Firefox running on it, which is super helpful for things that have like a web interface, like let's say like an ASA, or let's say you were installing like a Palo Alto firewall or something and you want to get to the GUI and manage it from there instead of the CLI. I know, right? Not a whole lot of fun, but either way, it's pre-built in there, so you don't necessarily have to use those, but I found those super helpful. One's actually an Ubuntu server, and you can actually load an Ubuntu lab in here, or an Ubuntu box by itself, I'm sorry, and run that, you know, as a container as well. I find it to be a little bit slow because, you know, it's running a full image of Ubuntu, which I don't necessarily need the whole thing. So it's cool to have those Docker images that are right on hand there to be able to kind of just like poke around with and have some fun. So that's kind of the main differences. And what I would say is if you're gonna go with an emulation software like GNS3 or EVE, over, let's say, buying your own hardware, or even if you were going to do both of them, I think it's beneficial to just try it out, right? So GNS3, EVE Community Edition, both free. So you could try those without any sort of hesitation, right? It's not going to cost you a penny. Now, once you get used to it, right, some people find it hard to leave the particular software that they're used to, but you know, that's completely personal preference. But if you're looking for certain things, like I was, the ability to do a lot of nodes, a Docker container support, and that link problem injecting, I'll call it, those things weren't available to me. So I ultimately went with Eve. But of course, the real hardware is always good too, but it's lacking some functionality. I would say having a combination of all of those things is probably a good thing. So let's just go ahead and get started. And we're going to download it, and I'm going to load it into ESXi and give you a couple of tips and tricks so that you don't make the same mistakes I did down the line if you do plan on upgrading. All right, let's get to it. All right, so back at the screen here, we're just going to go to download, and we've already agreed that we're going to get the community edition here. Takes us right to it, and what you're looking for is either the OVF or the ISO, and this is going to completely depend on whether or not you're running, let's say, like VM Workstation or VM Fusion for your Mac users out there, or Oracle's VirtualBox. That would be completely up to whatever it is you're doing. Personally, I installed the full ISO. It's actually like an Ubuntu server running this, so I went with this one, but pick for whatever you're using. So again, if you're just using like a desktop emulation software, you're going to want to go with this one. And if you're not, if you're running this on like an ESXi host, for instance, you're going to go with this. And once you've got that downloaded, we're going to head to ISOs here, make sure we have it here, and we can see Eve. It's the newest version. I actually downloaded it a while ago, so I don't want to put you guys through the pain of watching it download. I know that can be kind of a pain in the butt. From here, I'm just going to navigate to your ESXi host. Here's mine here. Again, you can see some of the specs that I have, and really I have this built out so that it will be able to handle as many nodes as I throw at it. Up here, I've used 550 gigs. This is just me allocating that much space to my Eve NG Pro. But we're going to install Community Edition here in addition to this. So I still have plenty of room over here. I just kind of want to point that out just to give you kind of a heads up if you're going to go down the Pro route, maybe some considerations. So under the virtual machines here, we're going to create and register a VM, and you do have the option of deploying a virtual machine from an OVF or OVA. I'm going to hit next here, create new virtual machine, and we're going to call this Eve-com for community. Select Linux, and we're going to go to Ubuntu Linux 64-bit, hit next, and we're going to pick my main data store here and customize some of the settings. Here's where you have the opportunity to change the hard disk. Here's where you have the opportunity to change some of this around here. So of course you're going to need more than 1024. I'm actually just going to leave it right there right now. The one thing that I would say is important to think about at this particular time is the hard disk size. I have a terabyte free here, but this is only going to take 16 gigs. I'm actually going to put this at 50, let's say, because the more nodes you're running, they're going to open up a small bit of hard drive space, and you're going to want to have enough space there. And you can't expand this later. Well, okay, you can. It's very, very difficult, and I would highly recommend not doing it unless you're some sort of virtualization professional. So that being said, I am not one, therefore I found it very difficult. What you end up doing is adding another hard disk down the line and not expanding this one, so it's a completely different process. So give yourself enough here, what you think you might need, whether it's 50, 100, of course depending on how much space you have. And then you can kind of leave all this, the rest of the stuff kind of defaults, because you can change it. You can change the amount of CPUs you use, the amount of memory you use. So we'll just say 8 gigs. Let's give it 4 cores there. And then here, we're going to change the CD DVD drive to a data store ISO file. And that's going to be basically the virtual machine booting off of a disk. And we're going to mount the disk as if this machine is booting up with the disk actually inside the CD drive. So we're going to hit select, and all I did before was I hit upload, and I went to ISOs, and I did this beforehand, right? And I just clicked this. And again, there's like my FreeNAS ISOs in there, for instance, my VMware as well. So you just click on that and upload it to here, and it'll show up. And then you hit select. Once you've got that selected, we're gonna hit next and finish. So now it's going to create our EVE-NG community, which is, as you can see, gonna boot up now when I hit power on, and we'll just watch it boot up here. So see, it goes directly into this Ubuntu server. So English, yes. Gives us a couple options here: install Eve VM, install Eve Bear, or rescue a broken system. Now, I have read in a couple of places online that the Eve Bear metal install works better, and I was doing a lot of Googling, so I found these in, like, you know, really dark corners of the web, which is kind of weird to begin with. But yeah, people were just saying that it worked better. It didn't work as good running as a VM, and you know, you're kind of like running VMs in a VM, so I don't know, maybe that's part of the issue. But not a virtualization guy, don't shoot me here. But this would be where you would do that, right? Because like I said before, it's really just an Ubuntu server ISO. So from here, I'm gonna pick install Eve VM, which is the virtual machine, not the Eve Bear. So let's hit enter. From here, it should take us through a couple of install prompts. English again, unless of course you speak a different language. I'm in the United States. Now it's gonna go do its dirty work here. And while this is doing its thing, you know, feel free to go grab the adult beverage of your choice, whatever that happens to be. Mine's actually a Diet Dr. Pepper Cherry. So I'm really living on the edge over here. But this takes a couple of minutes, so, you know, maybe if you gotta walk the dog or clean out the litter box or whatever, this would be a great time to do that. Okay, now it's prompted me to configure the network. And one thing I will point out too is that, you know, as long as your ESXi host or your VMware machine, however you're running this, is connected to a DHCP server, this thing should be able to find its own IP address, which is okay for now. I always recommend, you know, statically assigning things, but it's okay because we just want it to grab an IP, make it as automatic as possible, and then we'll navigate to it and change it later if we need to. The host name is going to be EVE-NG. I'm just going to leave that the way it is. Hit next. I'm going to find a nice network time server, and it says that my time zone should be America, Los Angeles. This is a good sign because it knows where I'm at. I'm not exactly in Los Angeles, but that's my time zone. And this is telling me that I'm actually connected to the internet. So that's a pretty good sign already. So we're going to hit yes to that. I'm going to go through a couple of different things here. Okay, so now it's asking us to configure the package manager. This is for an HTTP proxy. We're not going to use one. You don't have to, but if you do, this is where you'd be setting that up. But I'm just going to hit continue and let it go about its merry way. This is a good time to mention that if you don't already follow myself and some of my colleagues on Twitter, you should do so at aaronengineered, just like the YouTube channel name here. And if you're studying for a test, you know, we have some cool Discord groups set up for that, as well as a podcast coming out soon, which is going to be great. So be sure to check that out. And always hit the like button. Always hit the notify me button so you know when I upload a new video, and please subscribe. Thank you so much. Okay, so here I'm gonna say I don't want automatic updates. I want to be able to do that myself. Okay, installation is complete. We've finally reached the end of the race here. So now we just have to reboot and take the ISO out of the CD drive, basically, so that it doesn't keep booting to it. Ubuntu. You can see in the background here where basically we're all fired up now. You can see some of the stuff that I provisioned earlier. So it's got the 100 gigs, the 8 gigs of memory, and the 4 vCPUs, and then a little bit of a consumption here. So that's pretty cool. Already starting to see some action. And what we're looking for here is when this boots up, it's going to give us, I believe it starts an Apache server, and it's going to give us the IP address that it got from our DHCP server, and then we're going to be able to log into it with the default credentials from our web browser. And one thing to point out too is this entire program is going to run through the web browser if you're running it on, you know, like my DELL PowerEdge here. So there's no resources whatsoever other than just a HTML5 web browser that's running on your machine. So you can leave nodes on, you can do whatever it is you have to do, and then, you know, play video games at the same time if you want. So that's a pretty cool feature. So this is basically a two-step process. It installs the Ubuntu server first, and then it installs the EVE-NG image on top of that. So you have to go through a bunch of screens. So once the Ubuntu server reboots, then it's going to start installing EVE-NG, which is what took so long here. I fast forwarded through all that, but this is the screen that you're left with, and there are some very important things on the screen. You don't need to log in here. If you want to, the root password is root and password is Eve. The two most important things on here right now is going to be that IP address, because we're going to navigate to the Eve instance with that, and then on top of that is the neither Intel VTX or AMD vfound, which is a problem. So we're going to fix that real quick. So I'm just going to close this, and we are going to shut this down. Okay, now go into CPU. Oops, sorry. Now go into edit and go to CPU, and we have to expose hardware assisted virtualization to the guest OS. And this is not on by default, and it wasn't in the main menu when I first went through this. But like I mentioned before, you can change all that stuff that you had originally set here to CPU and the RAM and stuff like that. So hit save. Now we're going to power this guy back on. It'll go a lot quicker this time. Alright, so now that little warning message has disappeared. So let's go to 192.168.0.61. 192.168.0.61. Hit enter. Alright, so we're good to go here. Username is going to be admin, password is Eve, EVE, and I'm going to pick the HTML5 console, hit sign in. And here we are at the main page here. I don't have any labs, but this is free, so you can go in and poke around in it, right? So see the system, you know, the allocations here, how much memory you're using. This is great if you're running a ton of nodes, like I'd pointed out. And then all from here, all you have to do is go in and add a new lab. So name it, and then get to configuring. So right now I'm currently using EVE-NG in my lab. I've switched from GNS3. At one point I was also using Viral, the first edition. I will say that the second edition of Viral, which is Cisco Modeling Labs, is much better, but it's where I actually got the images to put into Eve was the original Viral. So you were able to download those from Cisco's website. So I hope this has helped. I'm going to leave the links in the description so that you can get to all the stuff that I clicked on around here. And let me know if you'd like to see anything else in the future. See ya.